It was late, way too late for a girl to be wandering alone in Soho, but here I was. I stepped out of the crowded party, squinting against the harsh city lights. The music had been loud, the drinks had been strong, but I was done. My best friend Mia had bailed early, and now it was my turn to figure out how to get home to Jersey City. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the Uber app, my fingers numb from the cold. Please be quick, I muttered to myself, hitting request ride. The city buzzed around me, the hum of nightlife louder than the occasional honk of a car horn. The app beeped, and the little car icon popped up, showing it was only a few minutes away. I shoved my phone into my back pocket and wrapped my jacket tighter around my shoulders, watching the streetlights flicker overhead. The night air stung my skin, but there was something else there too, something unsettling. My head still spun from the alcohol, and the weight of the night felt heavier by the second. When the car finally rolled up, I squinted. The driver's side window rolled down slowly, almost unnervingly, and I caught a glimpse of him staring at me, his face half shadowed by the streetlights.
Emma?
His voice was low, rough, like he'd been asleep, or like he hadn't spoken in ages. Yeah, I replied, stepping closer to the car. I felt the slightest hesitation, a cold crawling sensation creeping up. It was just a late-night ride. I opened the door and slid into the back seat, trying to push the weird feeling aside. The inside of the car smelled weird, stale, like metal and something faintly sour. The upholstery was too clean, almost too new, and the car itself, it felt silent, like it was holding its breath, if that even made sense. But I tried to ignore it, focusing on the streets outside as the car pulled away.
You're headed to Jersey City?
The driver asked, his voice still distant. He never quite turned to look at me. Yeah, just across the river, I said, forcing a smile, hoping it didn't sound as shaky as it felt. He nodded without looking at me, hands gripping the wheel too tight. His veins stood out sharply on his wrists. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The city blurred outside, the bright lights of Soho morphing into quieter, darker streets. But the silence in the car felt wrong. Thick, like something was hanging in the air and I couldn't place it.
So, you've been here long?
He asked, his voice soft, almost like he was just making conversation. I didn't want to be rude. Not long. Just moved to Jersey City. It's nice, I guess. Quiet.
Quiet?
He repeated, like he was tasting the word.
Yeah, it can be quiet.
I shivered, despite myself. There was something unsettling about the way he said it. The tension in the air seemed to thicken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that driver was a little off. I shifted in my seat. How much longer?
A little longer,
He murmured, his eyes flicking up to the rearview mirror.
You're headed home, that's good. A lot of people don't get to go home.
I frowned, trying to brush off the dread building in my chest. What do you mean?
Nothing.
His voice shifted, dropping lower.
Just thinking about the city. It's full of people who think they're going places, but they're just stuck. They don't even know where they're going.
I felt my stomach drop, a cold sweat beating on the back of my neck. I glanced out the window, trying to distract myself. The streets outside had become unfamiliar. The lights were dimmer, the buildings towering too close. This wasn't the way to the bridge. Are you sure you know where you're going? I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice was tight. My heart started to pound hard in my chest.
I know exactly where we're going,
He replied, his voice soft, almost too soft. His words felt strange, like he wasn't talking to me, but to someone else. I pulled out my phone to check the map, but the screen froze. The app had crashed. The little blue dot blinked aimlessly. I hit refresh, but it stayed the same. Panic started to creep in. Are we lost? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver didn't answer. He just kept driving, his hands stiff on the wheel. The streets outside had become even more unfamiliar. Narrowing, twisting. I could feel my breath quicken, my heart racing. I think you missed a turn or two, I said, trying to sound calm. Can you pull over? I'll just get out here. But the car didn't slow. It kept moving, the engine humming with an almost eerie smoothness.
I think you're just drunk,
He murmured, his voice low, almost as if he was talking to himself.
You've been running from something, haven't you? You think you're going home, but maybe it's better if you don't.
My pulse was hammering in my ears. I reached for the door handle, my hands shaking. It wouldn't budge. I tugged harder. Panic clawed at me. "I don't want to be here," I whispered. "Please stop the car." He smiled, slow and unnerving, in the rearview mirror.
But we're almost there,
He said. The car sped up, and I could feel the world closing in. My eyes darted around, looking for anything familiar, but all I saw was a blur of darkness and strange, empty streets. I grabbed my phone again, trying to turn it on. The screen was dead. Where was I? The city outside had completely morphed into something unrecognizable. No streetlights, no cars, just a vast stretching darkness. My hands gripped the seat. My breath was shallow, ragged. And then, just as suddenly as it had all started, the car slowed. I froze. The air was thick with silence, suffocating. I glanced out the window. Something looked familiar. I recognized the old diner down the block, the corner store. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't help the wave of relief that washed over me. I whispered. "Are we here?" He didn't answer. He stopped the car. We were in front of my apartment building. I stared at the building, blinking in disbelief. The same one I'd left just hours ago. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, and I felt fear and confusion. The driver's voice was soft as he spoke, his words lingering in the still air.
You've made it. This is home, isn't it?
I nodded numbly, my body heavy with exhaustion, still not sure if I had just imagined the whole ride or if I had really been somewhere else. "Thank you," I muttered, my voice barely audible as I stepped out of the car, the cool night air rushing in to greet me. I turned to look back at the car once more, feeling the weight of the silence behind me. The driver didn't move, his figure a dark silhouette in the front seat, his eyes still reflecting that strange, hollow intensity in the rearview mirror. With a final glance, I slammed the door shut and rushed into the building, heart still hammering in my chest. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, the walls too close, the lights too dim. I barely noticed the familiar chime of the elevator reaching my floor, only focusing on getting to my apartment. I fumbled with the keys, still feeling a little drunk, hands trembling, and finally pushed open the door to my apartment. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, I leaned against it, gasping for air. The silence of my home felt like a relief, but I couldn't shake the unease, the unsettling feeling that the ride had left me with. The sense that something had changed. I could still feel the weight of the driver's eyes on me, even though he was miles away. Shaking, I got into my bed and pulled the covers up tightly, closing my eyes, but I couldn't quite escape the feeling that something was wrong. Something in that ride was not quite finished. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I looked over to see a notification. An Uber receipt. The notification read, "The ride had ended." My eyes slowly opened wide, mouth gasped with a quiver in my lips as I dropped the phone to the floor. It was a ride I took from 2 years ago.